You're listening to the Potaholics Comedy Network. Potaholics.com.
Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. My name is Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week, we are not talking about the book, The Ultimate History of Video Games by Stephen L. Kent.
Whoa.
It's crazy. We're doing things a little bit differently, Mike. What are we doing?
We're going a little off book today because I want to spend more time on the consoles we've talked about, and we'll go back and do this with the older ones, but we're going to stick right now to the 32-bit and the 64-bit generation because they're kind of together, you know? Mm-hmm. And today, we are doing the top 10 best-selling N64 games of all time. So we're spending a little bit more time with the games. This is a history of video games, after all.
That's right.
We got to talk about the
podcast
games.
got games.
This podcast got so many games. So yeah, we're essentially today. I gathered a list of the top 10 best-selling super N64 video games of all time, and they are super though. All of them are super. In fact, a lot of them have
ultra
super
mega
in the title.
64.
Yeah, so they're based on how many copies they've sold, not money made, but copies sold. And full disclosure, I got a lot of information on the game development side from Wikipedia, but I always looked at the citations to make sure they weren't some dude's blog. So they're all legit. None of the citations I looked at include the phrase .blogspot.com. So I think we're in a really good spot today.
Although in this industry, you can get some pretty good stuff from just blogs of people who are like, yeah, I worked on Super Mario 64 20 years ago, .blogspot.com.
Yeah, that's actually the number one website I used. No.
Yeah. I worked on Super Mario 64 20 years ago, .blogspot.com.
Yeah, it's really wordy, but it's got a lot of info, got a lot of good info. And speaking of Super Mario 64, that is the number one game to start out with.
Number one best-selling game.
I feel like we should go from top to bottom. Just go for it.
Yeah. I mean, they're all great games, right?
Yeah, and I actually quizzed some friends of mine, and they all thought the number two game was the number one game. But no, it was Super Mario 64, published by Nintendo EAD. And EAD, I actually looked this up. Let me scroll down and go to the part where it says what it is. It's Nintendo's Entertainment Analysis and Development Division. That's what that stands for. So if you see a game that says created by Nintendo EAD, it's the Entertainment Analysis and Development Division, which is a really cool way of saying this is the group that makes really good games.
I remember 1080 snowboarding had all of the pre-programmed in high scores before you obviously went in there and put your own high scores in because you're really good at that game. We're all EAD, like you say. That was what it was, like the initials. So
yeah, that's probably what it is. So yeah, we've talked a lot in length about Super Mario 64, but it did sell 11,910,000 copies. So
I bet that's pretty roughly close to how many Nintendo 64s sold because it was the pack-in title, especially at launch. So
yeah, it shipped within it, and we talked about it before. It's Shigeru Miyamoto's masterpiece at the time. I think it's an amazing game. It's still an amazing game. It holds up. It's super fun. You're in the castle. You're jumping through paintings. Everyone remembers racing that penguin. It's fantastic. But the real thing it's known for is this is the first time there was 3D rendered worlds in every painting that you jump into, and there was a scale. I don't know the name of it, but the one where you're climbing the round mountain to battle the giant Goomba on top of it, the giant mushroom Goomba on top.
Oh, yeah, Bob on Battlefield.
Yeah, Bob on Battlefield. Or is it a big is it a Goomba or is it one of those big chain chomp guys?
It's a giant Bob-omb. It's King Bob-omb.
Oh, it's King Bob-omb. So, that would make sense why it's called Bob on Battlefield. But yeah, I just forget which Mario villain you battle at the top of it. But that was such a cool level. Just climbing that whole thing and figuring out how to get up there with the long jump and the triple jump and all that stuff.
Yeah. That's the first level in the whole game, too, or the first star that you get in the whole game is to get to the top of this mountain and beat this boss. That's literally the very first thing you do, which is so cool because it teaches you how, because people hadn't played games in 3D worlds like this before. They had to be taught how to move and how to maneuver and what kind of obstacles are going to be in their way. So you hit from the very start of the game when you're outside the castle, the whole place is sort of built in a way that lets you experiment without repercussions, like you fall into some water maybe or things like that. But it was so it taught you how to run and jump and climb trees. And then once you get into Bob on Battlefield, this is where it starts throwing the harder stuff at you. But that's the first thing you do is beat this super cool boss.
It's so cool.
Man,
it's such a good
Nintendo.
game.
Yeah, no tutorials. They just throw you into the game and they say, just go forward. And like, we have designed this in such a way that you will learn how to play this game.
Oh, yeah. So, all right. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on that first game because we talked a lot about it in the episode. Yeah. But the second game is Mario Kart 64, released on December 14th, 1996, selling 9,870,000 copies.
Wow, that's right up there with Super Mario 64.
Yeah, and its original production name, it was started being produced in 1995, and its original title was Super Mario Kart R, because the R stood for rendered, as in it's using 3D graphics. Which is very fancy. And it was intended to be a launch game for the N64, but they decided to focus more on Super Mario 64 as the main launch title, which I think was a good decision.
Yeah, it was a good call. Good call.
We're going to find that actually with a couple of these games in the top 10 list, that they were supposed to be launch titles, and then they were like, no, let's go all in on Super Mario 64. And I'm sure glad they did.
Yeah.
So Shigeru Miyamoto actually acted as a producer, and he consulted with the game director Hideki Kono. They worked together as a team, but it was mostly Hideki Kono's game. But Shigeru Miyamoto's like, hey, these are my characters, so let's just let me help you out a little bit.
Don't do anything dumb with Mario, okay?
Yeah. And the game, they said, was 95% done when it was shown off at the Shinkai Software Exhibition in Japan on November 24th, 1995. But they didn't demo it because they were having a hard time trying to figure out how to demonstrate 4-player multiplayer without playing it. And that was like the big feature of Mario Kart 64. It's like battle mode was so fun.
Yeah,
or
with
you
the
could
balloons.
do you could do 4-player versus 2-player Grand Prix. Oh man, great game.
Yeah. And this was a time. This was the first console that had 4 controller ports built in from the start. Because the PlayStation had a multi-tap. There was a multi-tap for Super Nintendo. I think even the NES had a power play adapter or something similar to that. That let you play 4 players on games that supported it. But being built into the Nintendo 64 meant that any game could support it without making it so that it was we'll support it for just these people who bought this accessory. So it's there's a weird a thing that happens there with an accessory that doesn't get supported by people who don't make games for it, and people don't buy the accessory because there's no games. And so building 4 ports into the Nintendo 64 was huge for 4-player multiplayer. Oh yeah, and it comes in really heavy on this list too. You'll see the games that are really popular. They're really good multiplayer fun party games. So the original prototype of the game too, by the way, was way more heavily influenced by Super Mario Kart in that the feather was an item, which was in Super Mario Kart, which it lets you jump.
Yeah, they took that out.
That feather.
They took that out of the game for 64. Also, Magic Koopa was one of the 8 playable characters, but he was later replaced with Donkey Kong, which is important. And they put Donkey Kong in there because of the success of Donkey Kong Country 1 and 2. And in fact, the Donkey Kong player model is designed by Rare. Every other model is designed by Nintendo EAC, but this was designed by Rare, which is the Donkey Kong player model.
Wow, I didn't know that. I wonder if it uses the same model they used for Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah, I wonder too, because Donkey Kong 64, not to jump ahead, but that game, the model is really similar. They must have already been working on that game when they were making the model for Mario Kart 64.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, so the driving controls, they wanted to do it to look like you're driving a radio-controlled car, because they felt like that would be easier for people to learn and to understand. And while the tracks are in fully rendered 3D, the game uses something called billboarding to display the characters and items. And I didn't even think about this until I read this, but billboarding is where they take a textured flat object, usually like a polygon. So in this case, Donkey Kong riding a cart. And
it's just a bitmap,
it's just an image, and that is always facing the camera, so it gives the illusion that he's in 3D, but really it's just this shaded sprite is what they're called that follows around. And it's actually the reason they had to do that is because they couldn't have the fully 3D rendered maps and fully 3D rendered characters. There's no way it could run on a cartridge. So
they just couldn't do it. Just didn't have the power.
Yeah, and that process is called billboarding, which I thought was pretty interesting.
What's interesting is there's a lot of different angles that you can see the characters at, depending on which way the camera is facing. So rather than render it in 3D with regular polygons like you would think, it would just calculate what angle the camera was at and show you a different billboard. So you can see that, like that there's only like a few different frames of animation there when like the camera sort of spins around at the start of a race. You can see it's very interesting.
Oh yeah, I didn't even like think of that. Now looking back on it, you're like, it's so obvious when you look at the pictures. But as a kid, you're just like, this game is beautiful. Okay, and now I want to talk about my final gripe with Mario Kart, because I would always get mad because I started noticing this as a kid. I'm like, hey, how come when I'm in first place for like 2 laps, I'll always screw up in the end? And it's because the game is designed to do that. It's called rubber band AI. So it's to prevent any racer from easily separating super far away from each other. You can still separate, but it really keeps all the AI players together to kind of keep the game close and keep it balanced. And that's also why they added the spiky blue shell of death to throw at people so that it can keep the game in balance. I just thought that was interesting because I always said like Mario Kart always gives it away, and it totally does, and they fully admit that.
Yeah, because it's not a competitive esport here. They're trying to, if you're in last place, they want to give you a little bit of extra. Like, it's always the last place person gets the lightning, they get the infinite mushroom thing, they get the blue shell, they get all the good stuff to try to help them catch back up.
I'm just super bummed because here I am trying to be MLG Mario Kart 64 player, and it's not happening, you know? So
it's not an esport like games like Jaybird are, you know?
Yeah, it's not like a true challenge, a true gentleman's match of Jaybird. I will say, favorite map, I feel like has to be Rainbow Road, right?
Oh,
the original Rainbow
man.
Road. Just that jump when you jump off of it and you fall down, and then just like, oh yeah, it feels so good. It's such a fun... It's such a cool game. I still have it for my N64. I love it so much.
I like the Donkey Kong level on that one, too, with the kind of launch across the river.
And the coconuts that hit you if you go off the ramp. Oh, it's great. That's such a good game. But yeah, Mario Kart 64, number 2, crushing it. And now number 3, we already also talked about last episode, GoldenEye 007. And we're not going to brush up on it, but it essentially made it so that first-person shooters were viable for console. If it wasn't for GoldenEye 007, we probably wouldn't have Halo. We probably wouldn't have like any first-person shooter that you love, Battlefield, Call of Duty, all that stuff. That was released on August.
GoldenEye 007. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, it's released on August 25th, 1997, and that sold 8,090,000 copies.
Yeah, GoldenEye 007 and Perfect Dark really just crushed it as far as FPS go.
I always, this was going to be in my honorable mentions at the end, but Perfect Dark was my most played N64 game. I still have it. Oof, I played it so much. I loved how it saved all your multiplayer stats.
Yeah.
It's such a good, and they had bots. It was the laptop gun. Oh, can't get over it. But anyway, I want
the 360 remake is great too.
Oh yeah, I want you, Tyler, to talk about Ocarina of Time, because this is your wheelhouse.
Number 4, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Between this, so there's this and one other game that I spent the most time with on Nintendo 64. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time was I want to say the fourth console Zelda game, because you had Zelda 2, Link to the Past, and then so fourth console Zelda game. But this was the next game in a long line of games made for the Nintendo 64 that perfectly recreated the feel of these older 2D games like Super Mario Brothers or Super Mario World, or I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but like Legend of Zelda in 3D. It was like, this is how you take a 2D game and make it into a 3D game without losing any of the essence of what the older games were, while updating them and making them accessible and fun to play in 3D. So man, Ocarina of Time. It was first shown as a technical and thematic demonstration video at Shoshinkai Trade Show in December 1995. It was developed concurrently with Super Mario 64 by Nintendo EAD, and it actually runs on the same engine as Super Mario 64, slightly modified. That engine would also carry forward into Wind Waker on GameCube as well. Obviously,
really? That same
modified.
Engine?
Yeah. Yeah, oh, wow. I mean, they modified. It's not the exact same thing, but they sort of kept building on it.
Yeah, I actually have a note down here that says, like, Miyamoto was like, it's on the same engine technically, but we modded it so much.
Yeah.
He's like, we modded it so much. So Wind Waker's, I'm sure, the same, but...
Yeah, but Ocarina of Time was like so cool. Just this, like, it was this huge open world of just being able to go wherever you wanted and do whatever you wanted, which wasn't that different from the older Zelda games, which is why it was so cool, because they perfectly recreated that. Just so good. It was so cool. Well, Miyamoto was directing Super Mario 64 at the same time, but he was also head of all of the directors on Ocarina of Time. So he oversaw a team of 5 directors that worked on Ocarina
He's
of
working
Time.
on 2 games. It's so crazy to me.
The
So
absolute
busy.
madman.
Yeah. The genius of Shigeru Miyamoto.
Yeah, I remember getting my mom to get me a copy of Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. I found the poster in the issue of Nintendo Power. There was like a special issue of Nintendo Power that was like all glossy and stuff that I had. And there was a poster of Link fighting back skeletons and stuff as he's like back to back with Sheik. And I showed it to my mom and I was like, Mom, I have to have this game. And so she got it for me.
That's a good mom right there.
Yeah. And that was not a cheap game either. I want to say it was $60 or $70 too.
Yeah. Well, it's also huge.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why. Because it's 32 megabytes, which is gigantic for a Nintendo 64 game.
Oh, yeah. It's crazy. I think they originally wanted it to be on that CD-ROM thing. The
disc drive?
Yeah, the disc drive that was going to be an add-on. And then they were like, you know what? We got to put it on a cartridge because it's okay. What do they say? This is the exact wording of why they put it on cartridge. It was due to the high data performance requirements imposed by continuously reading 500 motion captured character animations throughout gameplay.
Wow. And this is not the first Zelda game that wanted to be on a disc drive but wasn't. The first Zelda game was originally supposed to come out on the Famicom disk system. I think it did in Japan, but that never came out in the U.S., so they couldn't release it on that in the U.S.
Yeah. I mean, this game was it's so good. Do you want to hear a fact that I forgot to put in here, by the way? It's originally Miyamoto intended it to be a first-person game.
Oh, that's in the slingshot mode and the bow and arrow mode, and like several different things.
He wanted it to be first-person, so all the time, like you're always Link's first-person. But he chose not to when they wanted to show the difference between child Link and adult Link.
Oh, that's what made it. You wouldn't be able to see him.
Yeah, we want to let you know that you're like aging in this game, which I think was great. It was a great choice, and also
that's the other super cool thing about Ocarina of Time was it had 2 different like versions of the same world, which they did in Link to the Past. Also, they had the light world and the dark world, but they kind of did the same thing where it was like you played as a kid up until a certain point, and then you turned into adult Link, and then you could go back and forth between being kid Link and adult Link, and seeing how the world is different from before Ganon taking over and after Ganon taking over, and it's so cool.
Do you get Epona as adult Link?
Yes.
You do? Okay, that's what I thought.
You can ride Epona as a kid in Majora's Mask.
Oh.
But not in Ocarina of Time.
Well, I had some 3 cool facts about Ocarina of Time. Can I do these ones, Tyler?
Yes.
Okay. Here's something that was cool. Several versions of Ocarina of Time were actually produced, and most of the changes were glitch repairs, but there's 2 distinct changes that were not glitches that they changed on purpose. And the first is they recolored Ganondorf's blood from red to green, because originally it was blood, like red blood, and Nintendo's like, no, we have a very strict anti-violence and anti-gore policy, so they changed it to green.
So somehow that slipped through the sensors the first time around. I had multiple copies of this game because I loved it, and I noticed that one of them had red blood and one of them had green blood.
The red blood one might be worth more. And the second alteration, and I thought this was really interesting, is the music you hear in the Fire Temple dungeon originally had a sample of an Islamic prayer chant, and they took that out. But it's not because people were upset that there was an Islamic prayer chant in the game. It's Nintendo's own policy of using religious material in games. They're
just like, oh, we didn't mean to.
Yeah, they're like, we can't have anything religious from any religion in our games, so we're taking this out, which I thought was really cool. I was like, oh, I didn't know that they censored themselves, essentially.
Yeah, they did that further in the re-release. So Ocarina of Time also came out on GameCube in 2 forms. It came out as a pre-order bonus. If you pre-ordered Wind Waker, you got a separate disc that had Ocarina of Time and like a Master Quest version of Ocarina of Time, which was like slightly modified and harder. And then it also came on the Legend of Zelda promotional disc, which was included with GameCubes, I want to say, starting in 2003 or towards the end of 2003. On the GameCube version of Ocarina of Time, there's a symbol that's used a lot in that game that's sort of a crescent and a star, which is also, I think, an Islamic symbol. They changed it in the GameCube version to be something non-religious.
Oh, interesting.
So they made further modifications to it even after.
They're like, we got to
was
get
on N64.
any religious reference out of
Yeah.
this game.
Yeah, so
Well, yeah,
you see that a lot in the Fire Temple with the blocks that you push around because it had that symbol on it.
Oh, interesting. I wonder if they unintentionally like went for this theme, not realizing that, and then they were like, "Oh wait, we got to fix this."
Yeah.
But man, Ocarina of Time. What do you think that might be considered the best game for N64?
I think it's right up there. I mean, if it's not at least on your list of best games for N64, you're
not selling just straight up. This is the best. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, people's opinions differ. It doesn't have to be your number one, but if it's not right up there, then
You know what's funny?
Yeah.
I never owned it for N64. I don't think I've ever even beaten it. I played it a little bit with friends. And
man.
Yeah. I have my N64. I should buy a copy of it.
You are so lucky because you get to play through it for the first time. I'm so happy for you.
I will say I did play the first temple, the forest. The
Deku tree or the forest temple?
The tree, the Deku tree.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I beat the tree. I beat the tree a lot. I think I beat the tree like 3 times because I played on my friends' consoles.
Yeah.
And then I never went farther than that.
Oh, man. You got the 3DS remake is really good. And it's like
I should get
upgraded graphics, upgraded frame rate. It's really, really, really good.
You know, I got myself a nice little 2DS over here. I might just have to do that next.
You should totally do that.
That game's amazing. So
that and Majora's Mask. Highly recommend.
Oh, yeah. Majora's Mask I played the shit out of, but I always screwed up. I actually rented Majora's Mask. I rented it, and I thought I would beat it in a week. No. Stupid kid brain. Silly. I got so confused and lost. I was like going onto my dial-up internet trying to figure out what to do.
Oh, and the tragedy of renting Nintendo 64 games was that the games themselves were saved to the cartridge. So if you weren't renting the same cartridge, if you rented it more than once, you had to start over, or you take it back and like then the next week you come back to get it again, and like some like kid had erased over your file or something. Some jerk.
Yeah. Don't even get me started on the errors I would get with N64 memory cards because I've beaten Tony Hawk's Pro Skater with all characters probably 3 times as a kid.
That's such
I kept
a weird
getting corrupted save files.
That's such a weird game because like there's no reason for that to require a memory card, but it did.
No, yeah, it's oh man. Anyway, we're getting very sidetracked. Okay,
yeah.
Number 5, Super Smash Brothers, created by HAL Laboratory.
It's original Super Smash Brothers.
Yeah, it's a Nintendo second-party developer, and it sold 5,550,000 copies, and it was released on January 21st, 1999. And this game, it's pretty interesting. It just a guy wanted to make a fighting game with 4 players. His name was Masahiro Sakurai, and he's like, I want to make this game with 4 players on it. I don't really know what to do. It was originally a game called... it's essentially it translates to Dragon King, the fighting game. I feel like I butcher the Japanese language enough on this podcast, so maybe I should just not this time. And he showed it to Satoru Iwata, which was his friend and coworker, and his friend was like, "This is great, let's do something." But Sakurai knew he had to do something to make the game stand out because a lot of fighting games come out and they're just kind of flops. And so he decided to put all the Nintendo characters in there without the permission of Nintendo.
Oh, so he went rogue and started building this game so he could show it to him.
And the original prototype he showed Nintendo had Mario, Donkey Kong, Samus, and Fox as playable characters for 4 players. And Nintendo was like, oh no, this is great. Like, we want this as a game. So he kind of convinced Nintendo into making it a fighting game. And the music was composed by Hirokazu Ando, and it's interesting I say composed because it's all original Nintendo music, but slightly altered. Mm-hmm. So you're not listening to the actual Zelda theme. You're listening to a slightly altered version of the Zelda theme that Ando made for you. And so the cool thing is he came back to do the music for Super Smash Bros. Melee, and yeah, it's just a great game. Like, this game was so many hours, of just my life.
It was so different from other fighting games too, because in other fighting games it was like 2 people fighting each other. You knock your health bar down and you do it in a way that's fun. But with Smash Bros, it was different because as you take damage in that game, you have a damage meter that actually goes up, and it's a percentage meter, and so it can go up beyond 100%. But the more damage you take, the further abilities knock you back. And so until eventually you're knocked fully away from the stage and you can't come back, and that's when you like lose a life.
Oh, it's so good. I love that game. I played as Mario too. I just loved playing as Mario. I thought it was so fun.
Yeah.
And then
big fan.
Oh man, I know friends that had that Pikachu with that down thunder attack. Get
Yep.
out of here. Or the bombs,
man.
Zelda bomb spamming. Oh man. Link's
Luigi
bomb spamming.
had the same uppercut as Mario, but if you did it at like just the right angle, it was like it made this really cool like noise that like let you know that you nailed it, and they like caught on fire and launched so much higher. Man, I wrecked people with Luigi back in the day, but he was a hidden character. You had to do some stuff to get him.
Yeah. I mean, just also the idea that the premise of the game is you're in a toy box and you fight the final boss is the hand of the kid that's like playing with you, like the master hand.
Oh yeah, I love that theme.
whole premise is just it's so
That's
good.
really good. Yeah,
It's such a good game.
I use that when I watch. This is a slight tangent, but like the Lego Movie is very similar in that, where it's like everything that happens in that movie is like, oh, this is just a kid playing with their Legos, especially Lego Batman with all the different like properties that are in there, like Harry Potter's and Lego Batman and like just all kinds of crazy stuff. I love that.
It's such a good, that's a good movie too. I just anything that kind of owns up to like, yeah, it's a kid. Like this is a kid and you're beating his hand, who's like the master hand. I love
that's so good.
It's so good. I got this game. I think I've said this before. I got this game and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater on the same day. It was a 2-game day.
Man.
I don't know how I pulled that off, but
The rare 2-game day.
I remember sitting in the basement in Eagle River, Alaska, and playing this game so much, and just like I just switched back and forth. But when I got to the Master Hand battle for this, I was just blown away by it. Oh man, it's so good. This game, Super Smash Brothers. Oh, enjoy it. Number 6. I don't know. I've never played number 6.
Oh.
Did you ever play this game?
Yes, I have
Do you
played
want to describe
this game.
it?
Yes. So number 6 is Pokemon Stadium. Released on April 30th, 1999, Pokemon Stadium sold 5,460,000 copies. Now, the Pokemon Stadium that we got in the United States was actually Pokemon Stadium 2 in Japan. They did they pulled some Final Fantasy stuff on us here.
Ooh.
So the first Pokemon Stadium, or Pokemonster Stadium as it was called in Japan, came out on August 1st in 1998. So this was also one of those games that was intended as a 64 disk drive launch title. Did not make it onto the disk drive, but it was converted to a standard cartridge, 32 megabytes, so same size cartridge as Ocarina of Time. But because of technical limitations, the first version only had 42 Pokemon available to battle instead of the full 151 that the Game Boy, that like all of the Pokemon that were in the Game Boy versions, there were 151. So you could only play with certain Pokemon. They were all in the game in the Pokedex, but they couldn't all be battled with because they didn't have all the proper animations. But when the game came out in the United States, it had all 151 Pokemon. It was super great. You could create a team of Pokemon from Pokemon Stadium, like within the game. You didn't have to own a Pokemon game to play this game. And so you could battle through. There's like a sort of ladder of trainers that you could battle through to get some cool stuff. But what was really, really cool about Pokemon Stadium was it included an accessory called the Transfer Pack that it plugged into the bottom of your Nintendo 64 controller, and it took Game Boy cartridges, specifically the Pokemon cartridges. And it would let you take your team from your Pokemon cartridge and battle with them in full 3D on your TV.
That's
and it
so
was
cool.
so cool. That was like one of those moments I remember just being totally blown away. Was like, that's my Pikachu from my game, and he's on my TV, and we're battling, and it was like, oh man, it was so cool. And what it also had was a mode where you could play the Game Boy game on your TV. So you plug in your cartridge and you could play it on your TV, and you could play it in Do Duo mode, which was double speed, or Do Trio mode, which was triple speed. And so it made doing, like, if you were grinding out for the Elite Four or something like that, you could level your dudes up and then bring them back into Pokemon Stadium. Oh man, that's really cool.
So cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Would it save your Pokemon Stadium progress to your Game Boy too?
No, it's saved to the cartridge. So I could be mistaken here. It's been a long time since I played this game, but you didn't actually gain experience points in the battles that happened on the Nintendo 64. So you would battle them, and then you would train them up more on your Game Boy, and then you would bring them to battle on the Nintendo 64, but they didn't actually level up on Nintendo 64. There was also a lot of really cool Mario Party style like mini games and stuff. It was just really fun.
That's a cool idea. Yeah, I played another Pokemon game for N64 that will be in my honorable mentions later. Okay. Donkey Kong 64. Number 7.
Yes.
November 22nd, 1999. It sold 5,270,000 copies. And I say we talk expansion pack, because that's the first thing. That was the big thing that came with this game. It had to have the expansion pack.
Yeah, it was one of the few games, I think this and Majora's Mask were the only games that truly required the expansion pack. A lot of other games like would be enhanced by the expansion pack or unlock new modes. Like most of Perfect Dark like wasn't available to you if you didn't have an expansion pack, but Donkey Kong 64 absolutely required it.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize you had to have the expansion pack to play Perfect Dark.
You didn't have to, but a lot of the game modes were gone if you didn't have
well,
it.
That means I had the full suite as a kid.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
This game, I didn't. This is the one where you had like the coconut gun, right?
Yeah, it can fire in spurts. If
Yeah.
he shoots ya, it's gonna hurt. Oh yeah, that's the one that with the DK rap at the beginning.
That's
too.
right, the
Oh, man.
DK rap. So this game was essentially it was developed by Rare. You'll notice Rare's on this list a lot.
Yeah.
Like they really were all about Nintendo at this time, and they were making great games. I mean, they made GoldenEye also. They made 2 more games on this list as well. But this series was essentially like not a direct sequel to Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Country, but they just really wanted to make a 3D Donkey Kong. That was the most important thing to them, was like getting this game made.
Yeah.
And it was essentially like delayed, and then like for the base console. Sorry, I'm getting kind of lost here. I'm moving around. But it was transitioned for release to like the N64, and then they were going to do an add-on for it that was delayed and eventually canceled. So they only released for the N64.
Another disc drive add-on.
Yeah, but they didn't do that.
Yeah.
And it had a team of 16 people working on it, which I think is kind of a lot for this time. I think.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, obviously, I know the team for Super Mario 64 was 15. So that's a pretty big game. So this is pretty big. And then 8 more people were added on for its later stages. And many developers actually came from the Banjo-Kazooie team and helped.
Yeah. This was at the height of Rare's like cute platformer games. Like they made Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64, and then they made Conker's Bad Fur Day. They were just making all of these platformer games with these like furry animals as their protagonists.
Which I love. I'm all down with furry, adorable animals, solving puzzles and doing stuff. And actually, Donkey Kong 64 was built on the engine of Banjo-Tooie.
That makes sense.
So that's same engine. But this game was really big. When it came out, I was with him in Alaska when he got this game, and it was cool because he had 2 expansion packs because he already had one for Majora's Mask, or maybe it's the other way around, whichever one was released, but he gave me the other expansion pack, and that's why I have one in my Nintendo 64.
The weird thing about the expansion pack, specifically with Donkey Kong 64, was the game actually wasn't built to require the expansion pack, but for some reason they had a bug that they could not track down. But if you had an expansion pack, the bug didn't affect anything. So they made it so that it required the expansion pack, but they didn't build it with the expansion pack in mind. They just couldn't figure out why it wouldn't work without it, which I think is really funny. So they're just like, you know what? Screw it. Put it in the box. I guess we're just giving these away now.
Yeah, and they definitely were like, oh man, we are kind of losing money on this, but it's going to save us a lot of heartache in the long run. You know? So I also remember them saying that it helped with the frame rate. It made the frame rate better.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
By using that expansion pack. But yeah, this game was really popular. I remember when it came out, it was pretty big. I didn't get it, but I remember it was pretty big. I seriously got Smash Brothers, and I didn't get another game for N64 for a while. I was all about Smash Brothers and Tony Hawk for so long. It was
Tony Hawk.
So good.
Dude, Donkey Kong 64 was a big game. It was a big moment. The game itself, not that great.
Yeah, I think it was more just 3D Donkey Kong was a big cool thing about it, but it wasn't the same as Donkey Kong Country, because Donkey Kong Country to me was just woof, that's revolutionary as far as platforms go. It's really amazing. But yeah, I think Donkey Kong 64, it just had it also had a really big marketing thing behind it too.
Yeah,
I think
that's probably why it sold so well.
I think I remember reading $22 million in marketing or something when it came out. So yeah, it was pretty big. But the next game I also never played because I already had a racing game, and that was Mario Kart. But the next game was Diddy Kong Racing, also made by Rare. Number 8.
Nice.
November 14th, 1997, 4,880,000 copies. So
that was a cool game because it was a racing game with a storyline.
Yeah. So originally, in the first stage of development, this game was conceived as a real-time strategy game with a caveman time travel theme worked in, and it was made by 4 Rare members: Chris Stamper, who you would know as one of the founders of Rare, Lee Musgrave, Rob Harrison, and Lee Schumann. But during the later stages of development, they actually got Disney IP, Walt Disney World IP, and they started making it into an adventure game called Wild Cartoon Kingdom. Which,
Wow.
Yeah, and Nintendo had no involvement in that. But then, in 1997, the game was changed again to be Pro-Am 64, a follow-up to the NES racing game RC Pro-Am. And Pro-Am had trikes instead of RC cars, like 3-wheeled motorcycles. And then, finally, due to Banjo-Kazooie being delayed until the summer of 1998, the team was like, we got to release a AAA game. And that's when this changed from Pro-Am to Diddy Kong, because they felt like the Donkey Kong was a stronger IP for sales, and they're like, this will sell more games, and they were right. They were totally right. Like,
So this game, they pivoted to Diddy Kong in June. No, they pivoted to Pro-Am 64, not even to Diddy Kong in June, but the game came out in November later. That's crazy.
yeah, I think this is a time where you could still get away with like doing a game in a year and have plenty of time. But so
Or 6 months.
Yeah,
5 months. Jeez.
That's nothing. Yeah, but the guy that I mentioned before, sorry, let me go grab his name again, Lee Musgrave, he said that the decision to choose Diddy Kong rather than Donkey Kong was Rare's choice, was the Team of Four's choice. And Nintendo actually liked it. They're like, yeah, let's open up this world a little bit more, you know? So once the intellectual property was changed, the team was left to adapt like visual aesthetics and packaging before it could be released. So essentially, the game was done. They just changed the model. So maybe that's why they did it in 5 months.
So it was just kind of a quick swap.
Yeah, and they wanted it to run as fast as Mario Kart 64, but it was harder to do that because they didn't use sprites and that billboarding we talked about before. Everything was fully rendered. And another final important note about Diddy Kong Racing is that Banjo and Conker were also both in Diddy Kong Racing as special cameos, but they didn't have their games yet. So they had these
they were like
two
special
random characters that were like special, but their games would come out later, which I thought was really neat.
You know, it's also interesting. Tip Tup, the little turtle guy that's in Diddy Kong Racing, he is in Banjo-Kazooie in Bubble Goop Swamp. That world. Yeah.
Bubble Goop Swamp. I like that.
Yeah,
oh, man.
He has like a Simon Says mini game you gotta do.
Oh, that's cool. I wish I played more Banjo-Kazooie.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Okay,
We'll get
number
there.
9. Star Fox 64. April 27th, 1997. 4 million copies. And honestly, I thought this game would be higher on the list.
Yeah, me too.
I really was surprised. I mean, if you'd have told me Diddy Kong Racing would have beaten Star Fox, I would have been like, get out of here, crazy person. What's wrong with you? I had no idea. But the first thing I wrote down about this game is everyone hates Slippy.
Oh, man. I agree.
Fox!
Get this guy off me, Fox.
Everyone hates Slippy. They love Peppy, and they don't know why Falco's so angry the whole time. That was my thing. I was like, why is this Falco guy so angry? And it's like, because I think it's the old Nintendo thing where there has to be like a rival, like in Pokemon. And I'm like, can't they just be friends?
He's like the Han Solo kind of guy of like, never tell me the odds.
Yeah, exactly. So it's actually the unreleased original second game in the Star Fox series, which was titled Star Fox 2, was developed to be like, it was actually almost done and ready for the SNES. And it was actually shown in gaming magazines like Nintendo Power. But ultimately, Shigeru Miyamoto, again, designing every amazing game for N64 and everything, wanted to move it and make it for the N64. So he actually realized that he could make it like so much better if he just put it on the 64. So he canceled Star Fox 2 and remade the game for the 64, but he did take some things from the Star Fox 2 game that never came out. That all range mode, where it would be like all range mode, and then the whole map would open up. Multiplayer mode and the Star Wolf scenario all came from Star Fox 2, and I love the Star Wolf level.
That game is on the Super Nintendo Classic, also Star Fox 2. If you beat the first level of Star Fox, you unlock Star Fox 2, and the game's done, so you can play the unreleased
the unreleased
Star Fox 2
game. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess this is something I had no idea, and this was just straight from Wikipedia, so I'm going to be talking about this, but apparently Shigeru Miyamoto is a fan of English puppet dramas, such as something called Thunderbirds.
Oh, Thunderbirds. I love Thunderbirds.
But consequently, when developing the animation sequences for Star Fox 64, the staff made the characters' mouths pop open and close like puppets for Miyamoto. And it made Miyamoto happy, but it also reduced the amount of animation they had to put into making the mouths move to pronounce the words correctly. If everyone just talked like that, it was just like a stylistic choice.
Yeah.
So it's just like, ba, 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 ba. Yeah. According to IGN, the game cartridge contains about 4 megabytes of speech data.
Wow.
So that's a lot. Like, the game did have a lot of dialogue in it.
Yeah, it's one of the most quotable games I think ever. I know every line from that game by heart.
Do a barrel roll. Yeah. I also love it was like Star Fox, and he's like Star Wolf. It's an amazing game.
Andros?
Andros? The game was known as the Lilat Wars in some areas of the world because Nintendo considered Star Fox sounded too familiar to another name of a German company called Starvox with a V. So they were concerned about legal disputes. So I think in Germany it came out as Lilat Wars, which I thought was interesting. This game, though, I mean, I love this game. Just everything about it. What's the tank called?
The Landmaster.
The Landmaster. It's just, those levels are so fun. Getting all the rings. It's such a cool, it really brings you into the whole world of it, which I think is what made me so happy about it when I was playing
the submarine level is so good too.
Oh, yeah.
Man.
I forgot about the submarine level. And then beating Andros. And also the fact that you can you can do different levels to beat the game.
Yeah, and like depending on how you finish the level would unlock a different level, and like there was definitely like a more difficult path that got you to the real ending, and like an easier path that got you to the not real ending.
Yeah, it's an amazing game. Again, I thought this should be higher on the list, but I think it's higher on the list for me as far as a game goes, not necessarily for how many copies sold,
right?
But as a game. So we can make that list later, you know. And finally, the 10th game, I never played it. You, Tyler, Banjo-Kazooie.
I'm so glad this game made the list, because if it didn't, I would have talked about it anyway. Banjo-Kazooie is probably the best game on Nintendo 64.
Strong words.
In my mind, it's very close and swaps a lot with Ocarina of Time. It's definitely tied. I don't know how much time I spent playing these games as a kid, but like Ocarina of Time and Banjo-Kazooie, I spent the most time playing, with Star Fox probably being a pretty close third to those. Banjo-Kazooie was a fully original 3D platformer made by Rare Games. It follows the story of a bear named Banjo and a bird named Kazooie, who is very foul-mouthed and very sassy, the bird. And they are trying to stop a witch called Gruntilda, who has stolen or is attempting to steal the beauty of Banjo's sister, whose name is Tootie.
I want to say the next sentence I wrote down, by the way, is what I thought the game was as a kid.
Okay.
I thought this was Nintendo's version of Crash Bandicoot. I had no idea what this game was when I was a kid. I was like, man. It's like Nintendo's Crash Bandicoot, and I never played it. And I think I was very wrong.
You goofed, man.
I goofed that game, so hard.
That is so good. Like, all of the levels are really, really well done. They're huge. They're expansive. The castle is so cool because it's similar to the Super Mario 64 castle, where you go deeper into the castle as you get further into the game. And then before the final boss, there's a game show where you have to answer questions, like trivia questions about the game you just played. And so it'll be like, where's this music played from? Or here's a screenshot of like a really obscure location. Like, what is this? Like, it's so cool and yeah, so much fun.
All I'm saying is, when they eventually come out with a N64 classic, which you know they will, these games have to be on them.
Oh, right? Yeah.
They have to.
I worry about this one because Rare, who's owned by Microsoft now, they own the copyright to Banjo-Kazooie.
Oh, does that mean this game would be a part of Rare Replay?
It is.
It
Indeed,
is
part of Rare Replay. Yeah, it came out on 360 like 10 years ago, actually, and it's the best way to play this game for sure. It's all HD, whatever. They made a couple of gameplay changes that made the game just like easier, but in a way that's better. Like, they're not stupid hard, you know.
I think I'm gonna have to buy Rare Replay. That's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I highly recommend this game. It's only a few bucks usually. You could get it separately if you wanted to too. And this one and Banjo-Tooie.
I feel like Rare Replay goes on sale on the Xbox store like once every 3 months.
I think it's part of Game Pass too, if you have that.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
Man. It's only like, isn't it only like $20 to buy though? I think it's really cheap.
Yeah,
It's
Rare
so
Replay is
good.
always cheap.
Yeah, it's so
and it has
good.
you'll get your Perfect Darks there too. You'll get Conker's Bad Fur Day.
I never played the second Perfect Dark game, the Zero or whatever.
You're fine. That's okay.
I'm not missing much. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, you're okay. Yeah, but Banjo-Kazooie is just. I played so much of this game. I played to the end, and then I would get stuck on the last boss because you had to have. I wouldn't ever get to the last boss because you had to have a certain amount of like jiggies to get there, and I never got that, or notes or something. And on N64, getting notes was a little bit harder than it is on the Xbox version. But I would always get there, and then I would just erase my file and start over, and like I would get back to the
Just
same
keep
spot
playing?
over and over. Yeah,
I am amazed at that. That's so funny that you just
Yeah.
love the game so much. You're like, I'll just restart it. I just love this.
Just restarted. I loved it so much. And then when it came out on Xbox 360, I sat down and I probably didn't get up until I had 100% of that game. Like,
Oh, wow.
I was like, this is my mission because it came out 10 years later. And I was like, I haven't played this game since, 10 years probably. And I was like, I never beat this game. And it's probably my favorite Nintendo 64 game. I'm going to sit here in my college dorm room and I'm going to beat the crap out of this game. And I did it. And it was like one of the most cathartic video game experiences for me because it was this game that I loved that I'd never finished. And I finally finished it. And
Wow.
So good.
Just to let everybody know, the Rare Replay is $13.30 on Amazon Prime, just so everyone's aware for Xbox
Super
One.
worth. Totally worth.
Yeah, I think that's totally my next purchase. I thought this game was just like, I had no idea about it. I knew it was like a thing, but I didn't understand it. And now that I'm reading it, I'm like, it's probably right up my alley because I loved like the puzzle stuff as a kid.
Yep.
That was my favorite thing to play. And like, oh man, really
So
missed
fun.
out.
Banjo-Tooie is good too. I never got that when I was younger. I just never realized that they made a sequel, I guess, or I wasn't interested in the sequel by the time it came out. I had kind of moved on, so I never really played it. And I do have that one on Xbox also, but I just couldn't get back into it. I think the reason I love Banjo-Kazooie so much is just because I played it so much. It's like I have the whole game memorized,
Oh yeah, so there's a spot now that I'm thinking about where I got stuck in Perfect Dark. And I wonder how far I was from actually beating the game because there were like these after missions that I was doing that were way harder.
Yeah.
And now I want to know. I'm going to do some Googling after this. It's just going to happen. Okay. I got to do some Googling. I also might set up my N64 next to my TV.
Yes.
For this because I'm so excited. Also, I have a lot of these games that are on farther down the list that we're going to mention. So
yeah, we're gonna cruise through these. I think what's crazy about this list because we have like we can go ways on games here. That was our top 10, but you have to go all the way to number 13 before you get a game that was not published by Nintendo, and you have to go all the way to 26 until you get a game that was not published by Nintendo or a Star Wars game.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you go like this game that like the Nintendo 64 its biggest weakness was third-party games.
Yeah,
it just didn't have them.
Yeah, we should also mention that Rare is still on that list before 26 because Rare, we're just going to say it's pretty much Nintendo at this point.
Well, at that time it was because Nintendo owned Rare and they published all their games. So
oh yeah, oh man. Do you have anything else you want to say? This really like little bit tidbit about the production of Banjo-Kazooie, about what it originally was called and stuff. Do you want to mention that?
Yeah. It was originally a game for the Super Nintendo that they were calling Project Dream, where you would follow a boy named Edison, and he had a wooden sword, and he fought pirates. And it was like sort of a cool, like isometric sort of. Now, I don't know if it was really a platformer, but kind of adventure game. And then by the time they got towards the end of working on Dream, they realized this is the end of the Super Nintendo's life cycle. We got to move on to the 64, and then it just sort of evolved from there to move away from what they had been working on, and it turned into Banjo-Kazooie. So
I love that. I like how these games, a lot of these big games too, have changed and adapted. Like Diddy Kong Racing changed like 3 or 4 times. But let's talk about our honorable mentions. And I'm going to start because number 11 on this list is Pokemon Snap.
Oh, yeah.
March 21st, 1999, 3,630,000 copies. A complete different game than any of the other ones you'll find on this list. Just you had to take pictures of Pokemon on a rail. Like that's it. It was so good. And my friend convinced me to buy this game, and I was just like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I obsessed over getting the perfect picture of Jigglypuff for at least 4 hours. So it's worth it.
That
it's
game
totally worth it.
I remember when that game came out, Pokemon Stadium had been announced, but it was definitely coming out like later on, and it was the first like 3D Pokemon. Wow, you're going to see Pokemon in 3D. That's why I bought it, because I was like, I can't wait for Pokemon Stadium. I need some other 3D Pokemon game. It turned out to be really fun.
And it's also made by HAL Laboratory, the same people that made Super Smash Brothers.
Yeah.
So that's important to know. And number 12 is all you again. I think that's on your honorable mentions. It has to be.
Oh, yeah. Majora's Mask is just a wonderful... it's a continuation of Ocarina of Time, only from the child timeline. So it's like adult Link has done all the things, saved the world, and he goes back to being a child and then goes on and lives his life. But it's him stumbling into another world that's not Hyrule. It's called Termina, and having to save the people there from this moon that is about to crash into the earth. And he has 3 days to do it, and he can rewind time and go back to the start of those 3 days as many times as he wants. But yeah, it was all about saving the world from this crashing. And as the moon gets closer to the earth, it like get this face on it gets meaner and meaner. And that game is great.
Yeah, it's such a cool premise.
Yeah, I didn't play that game till like 2013. I just never had it on N64. I rented it a couple of times, but I was kind of turned off by the time travel mechanic. But I played it again on emulators like years later, and I absolutely loved it. Like I can't believe I didn't play it sooner. It's so good.
Oh yeah, and I'm gonna even say like I didn't even know that it's number 13 on this list until just now. But I have that game, and Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, the pod racing game, was actually an amazing game. It was really good. It was so much diversity in the characters you could play, like all sorts of different aliens, and also diversity in the pod racers themselves, like the vehicles. Like there's so many different like technical boosts you can put on different things to make them faster and stuff. And it was just a really cool idea for a game.
Yeah, that game's great. The next one that I kind of want to talk about, where this is further down the list, we can skip around if we want at this point.
Of course.
But honorable mentions for me: 1080 snowboarding, man.
Oh, yeah, the panda.
Yeah, the panda who was just Rob Haywood with a panda mask on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that game is so good. It was like a snowboarding simulator in a time where there were a few different snowboarding simulators. Like I remember there was a game called Twisted Edge that had come out around then, and then a more arcadey one called Snowboard Kids that was pretty fun. But 1080 snowboarding was really, really fun. I highly recommend if you're like looking for some N64 game to emulate it. It's kind of half racing, half tricks. Very, very fun.
I can't believe you named the game that's not on this list that I love. I have it. Snowboard Kids. I bought Snowboard Kids. Yeah, I played it so much with friends. Like I had it figured out where you'd like smack people off their snowboards, and then there's always the fat kid that was like riding down really fast, but he had slow acceleration. Like you know.
Yeah.
And then we got to the point where we unlocked Shinobin, which was like the secret ninja snowboard kid. Oh man, that game is so cool. I love that game. I still have that game. It's just so good.
That game has a lot of. I don't think he's a playable character, but the Jack Frost character, the little snowman dude, you know, that's everywhere in that. That's actually a persona in the Persona games, pretty much all of them. Yeah, Jack Frost, and like there are several other like Frost characters that are made from him. But yeah, that's like Atlas's sort of unofficial mascot.
I like that. I love that game. That game is so perfect. Also, it's number 14 on the list, but I will say Wave Race. I had a friend that taught me how to do the cool thing in Wave Race where you do a code while you're on the jet ski, and he'll sit in different ways and do crazy things.
Oh, and that's cool.
I was really cool at a party one day because I knew how to do that, and everyone's like, how does this guy know how to do that? And I'm like, secrets, bro. You don't even understand. But yeah. Wave Race was a fun game. It wasn't super about to talk about, but it was kind of like an early release on the system, and it was, oh, look how good the water looks. Like that was what it was all about.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. Big fan of that game. Have that. Yep. Sand Wampas. What can you do? Also, like really like difficulty wise, very hard.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. But I mean, and we talked about Perfect Dark already. That's pretty much that was my go-to game.
You've got to talk about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, dude.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1. Didn't know anything about skateboarding, but it made me go outside and fail at it for probably hours and hours of my life. I would always play as Bob Burnquist.
Oh, yeah. He's the best. He's from Portland.
Yeah. I would play as Bob Burnquist all the time, and then I would do Bucky Lasek a lot as well. But
yeah,
the big thing I remember about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater is how you'd get good at the game, and you'd be able to like gold medal everything on a level in like one run. You'd get so good. And then that soundtrack just made you feel so cool. Like the Superman song. Like, and then you could change the music too, I think, as you were playing. Like if you want to skip a song.
You were playing the Nintendo 64 version?
Yeah.
If you were playing the PlayStation version, you got like higher fidelity, more and longer songs. It's probably worth going back and playing the PlayStation version just to hear like the true soundtrack to that game.
Oh yeah, because I definitely heard it on like the tinny cartridge version.
Yeah,
but the big thing about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was Officer Dick. That was the one, the secret character you unlocked that's a cop, and he'd just be skating and he'd start eating donuts while he was skating.
Yeah.
It's so funny. The game was just really fun, and it just, my friends, they had the two players had like horse. You could play horse, but it would be skate.
That was cool.
So you could challenge your friends. And then also it had 2-player free skate. So my brother and I would just be on split screen skateboarding in the game, just talking, just hanging out. But we'd be doing dumb tricks and trying to find like secrets in the levels and stuff. And it's an amazing game. Blue cartridge.
Yep.
Mind blowing.
Probably the only blue cartridge, I want to say.
No.
Oh.
Because I have in my possession an original copy of Bassmasters 2000 for Nintendo 64, and that 100% is a blue cartridge. And
That's
I am
great.
probably one of the only people in the world that knows that and bought that game.
That's incredible. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 was on a yellow cartridge. Wasn't the only yellow cartridge. DK64 was also a yellow cartridge. There's probably some other games too. But some interesting trivia about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. It was the last Nintendo 64 game released in the United States.
Really?
And Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 is on the Nintendo 64. That's a game that is also on the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox.
I was going to say, I thought I played it on GameCube for some reason.
It was on GameCube also.
It was?
Yes.
Oh, that's where I played it. That's interesting. That was the last game released on 64, though.
Yep. It was on the original PlayStation also. That's where I mostly played
That's
Tony Hawk 3.
That's a really good fact, Tyler. It's a great fact. Almost as good as the blue cartridge of Bassmasters 2000.
Yeah. I hope I'm right. Now I need to Google it and make sure I'm right
I'm
about
just
that.
kidding. I believe you, Tyler. You know what? People that are questioning you don't even know. They don't know what you're talking. They don't know what to talk about. You know, it's good fact. Good stuff.
Yeah. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. August 20th, 2002. That was well after the GameCube was out.
Oh, yeah. I will say another game that was on here was the original Pilot Wings, which we talked about a bit.
Game. Yeah.
That's all the way down at number 42. That only sold 1,120,000 copies, which is kind of crazy because that came out. That was the second game when
That's
the system
probably
came
the
out.
only reason it's even on the top 50 here, really, because it was fun. Like, I had fun playing it, but it wasn't that great, you know?
Yeah.
Like, if you had $60 to buy a Nintendo 64 game, there were plenty of better options than Pilot Wings.
Oh, yeah. Also, I should mention, too, a lot of this list is wrestling games. Wrestling games were very popular.
Oh, yeah. This was a kind of the 90s, like the mid-90s was sort of, I want to say, like a golden age of professional wrestling, kind of. I don't know a whole lot about that scene, so maybe I'm wrong, but...
No, yeah, I think you're right. I think that it's definitely on the list. Oh, Yoshi's Story was also a great game.
I love Yoshi's Story.
Yeah, so I think we I think we did a really good job covering the N64's library and catalog.
Oh, one more that's on this list.
Okay.
That's just neat from a technical perspective is Hey You Pikachu, which was another 3D Pokemon game that was neat, but it came with a microphone that plugged into the controller, and you could talk to Pikachu and ask him to do stuff for you. And I don't think the game was actually any good, but it was kind of neat talking to your video games.
Kind of a cool cool technology, you know?
Yeah,
just a fun little technological gimmick that people really like, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's before Siri or Alexa, too. So
That's right.
I would love to have Pikachu put stuff in my calendar for me now.
Before Siri and Alexa, there was Pikachu.
Hey, Pikachu, how do I get to this Taco Bell? That's what I want to do. That's what I want to talk into my phone. Also, we mentioned it as one of the worst games, but I will say Cruisin' USA was a large part of my life, and I just don't want to shy away from it. You know, That's also on the list, number 29, 1,720,000 copies, but it's not a great game, but it's just one of those ones that feels right to me because I played it so much, and I have a deep, beautiful spot in my heart for it. Okay, so, all right, now, Tyler, I'm going to ask what have you been playing, but we did something together very big this week.
We did.
What did we do?
We completed the first 3 encounters of the Last Wish raid in Destiny 2 Forsaken.
And we did it in 3 hours, and I had never done any of them before.
None of us had done it except for one other person.
Yeah,
that we were playing with, and he was kind of teaching us.
Yeah, we had like a leader showing us, and we did it 3 encounters in 4 hours. That includes pee breaks, me trying to do laundry while we're playing. So it was fun. I had a really great time raiding with you and the dudes and the Birdmen. I had a good time. So
the Birdmen.
It was very fun. It was a very low stress atmosphere, and it's pretty much made me want to raid a lot more now. Because
with those exclusive exotics, we got it. Like, I'm down to just do it every week. I'd love to have just a standing raid time where we do it.
Oh man, we can get that together immediately. I'm down to schedule that. We'll figure that out after the podcast. Yeah. But the other thing that I have not played yet, and it's been installed on my Xbox since Friday night, is Red Dead Redemption 2.
I'm really close to breaking my PC rule. I'm like trying to wait for the PC version, but I'm pretty close to.
Well, yeah, because you don't want to wait a year. You know.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to play it. I haven't played it because I've had shows all this weekend, and I've had a lot of other stuff going on, you know, like just hanging out with people and then doing stuff and trying to get some work done. And I know I want to spend a good 3 hours the first time I play that game to just have the time. Mm-hmm. So tomorrow is going to be my day. I'm really excited to just turn it on and have I have nothing to do for the next 4 hours. Let's just play this game. And I'm so excited for it.
That's going to be great.
So immersion wise, I think it's going to be really cool. And I'll talk about it next week. But now I think that's it. We did an hour-long episode today.
Yeah, that's pretty strong.
Pretty beefy. And I think next week we're going to do the PlayStation version of this list. And we'll see. I'm curious to see how many overlap.
Yeah, that's not a whole lot because there's all Nintendo games in the top 10. But in our honorable mentions, we'll get into some overlap, I think.
Oh, yeah. I am making a prediction. I haven't looked at the list. Okay. I think there's a good chance Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 is in the top 10.
Yeah,
PlayStation 1 games. Do you think that's fair?
That's a solid prediction, yeah.
I think we're going to also see some Final Fantasy.
Oh, for sure.
And I think we're going to also see a little favorite game of mine titled Twisted Metal.
Yep, Twisted Metal will be in there. And I wanted a lot of Crash games, Spyro games.
Oh, yeah, Spyro. I forgot they're remaking Spyro.
I don't know that one.
Was that your Alexa?
That was my Alexa. It just went off in the background.
And you said Spyro, and then she says, I don't know that one.
No one asked you, Alexa.
That was perfect. Okay, we got to roll. This was a great episode, though.
This was fun.
I had a very good time. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. You can follow us both on Twitter. Tyler's at SneakerElf, ELPH. I am at MeColetta. Also, we have a email called codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. Also, you can just talk to us. We just love you, and thank you so much for listening, you know?
Yep.
It's what it means to us. It means the world to us. Also, you can rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. That really helps us out a ton, and it means the world to us because we don't do anything to advertise because we're bad at marketing. I would go so far to say that.
We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. Next week, PlayStation Top 10 list. Thank you so much for listening. Bye, Tyler.
Bye, Mike.
And bye, audience. We'll miss you.
This has been a Potaholics Comedy Network presentation. Potaholics.com